Hi everybody, I'm Leah of seejanedrill, and today's video I'm really excited about. We're going to be doing traditional plastering, and we're going to do an entire wall. Now the reason why I'm excited, and I believe that this is a great skill to know, is because very few people plaster today, and because of that, you never know when you might need to use it, okay? Okay, so let's take a look at the wall we're going to plaster, and it's this wall behind me. And currently what we have here is what's called a sand finish. If you go right below it, you see a really awful repair. And if you go even further down, follow my hand here, what you're going to notice is we have some gypsum panels that don't quite match up. So here's the objective. What I want to do is I want to take that wall and I want a smooth finish. I want to create a glass-like finish on that wall, and I'm going to do traditional plastering to get us there. So this is a bonding agent. Now there are a few different brands out there. This is Plaster Well, that's what I'm going to be using today. Now, why do you use a bonding agent? Maybe you're wondering. Well, the reason for a bonding agent is because unlike joint compound, plaster doesn't have an adhesive. Joint compound, you put it on the wall, you don't have to worry about it adhering because there's glue in it. And plaster is a very natural material. It isn't anything really created. It's raw rock. So you don't have a bonding agent in it. And when you're going over an existing plaster wall, you have to use a bonding agent. Now I'm using a roller to apply the bonder. And if you're wondering why it's pink, it helps to show where you've applied the bond and where you have it. Okay, so our bonding agent is dry. It's dry to the touch, so now we're ready to actually start plastering. Now the first plaster we're going to use and mix up today is called brown coat, base coat. It goes by a brand name of Structolite as well. Now I'm just mixing it in cool, clear, clean water. Okay, I've got my browning brush here, that's what this is, and I've got a bucket of cool, clean water, and I'm going to use that water to keep my tools nice and clean as I work. Okay, so this is my mortar board here. You want to use a surface that's nice and clean. Now I'm going to pick up my Structolite, my base coat, I'm going to pour all of it on top of this board, and I will work from the board because it's going to be easier for me than if I were to work from a bucket. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my hawk, I'm going to back it up right here. I'm going to take my finished trowel, and this is where most people have the most difficulty, getting the mud to their hawk without losing it on their shoes or back on the table. So what we do is we just take a little bit like this and scoop it up there. That's it. So this is it. That's all you need. But here's the thing. We want to clean it off because this acts like glue, and it will help hold a hawk full of mud. So we're going to take that off, clean it off. Now comes time to really load up my hawk with plaster. I do the same thing, but this time I scoop a lot on. And I come across the top, lift it up, and we'll take a little bit off the sides there. So I've got a nice generous amount of plaster on my hawk, and now I can go to the wall and start applying it. Now this is how much mud you really want on your hawk, and I got to tell you, it's got some weight to it. But the more mud you can put on your hawk, or the more plaster you can put on your hawk, the less trips you're going to have to make to that mortar stand. Okay, so I've scratched it in. You're probably even saying to yourself, Leah, that looks awful. Don't worry about it, okay? Because this is my scratch coat. Now what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to double up on it. And then I'm going to take a tool called a slicker, and I'm going to lay that brown coat down. Okay, so I'm finished doubling up on my brown coat there. Now comes time for me to knock it down using a slicker, and that's what this tool is. Now I got to tell you quite honestly, there are plasters that prefer to use a tool called a derby. The derby is a little more heavy. It has wooden handles, but the most important thing is a derby has like a serrated kind of edge across the blade, opposed to a slicker that has a straight edge to it. I'm going to lay it up against the corner there, and I'm just going to pull. So we've allowed our brown coat, that's what this is, to dry overnight. And now it's rock solid because it is a rock. Now here's the thing. Brown coat provides a foundation for our putty coat. Our putty coat is that white plaster. It's the plaster that people think about when they think about plastering. And it's applied very, very thin. We're going to do it, and I'm going to show you how I do it, and I'm going to explain what I'm doing when I do apply the putty coat. But there's a few things you need to know about this stuff right here, and it's the brown coat, right, which provides the foundation. People ask, when you're plastering, what allows the plaster to stick to the wall or ceiling, okay? And what it is it's suction. The suction starts pulling the moisture out of the plaster that you're applying, the putty coat, and that's what gets it to stick. But here's the thing. If the moisture is sucked out of that plaster at a great rate, it'll crack. And that's why before I start to apply my putty coat, I'm going to have to mist this wall a little bit so that it controls the suction. So I'm able to control it a little bit. So it's not like too much moisture is being drawn out of the putty coat. Now before I start misting it, I have to do one last thing. Notice how I'm wearing safety glasses. It's because I've got to scrape this wall down, and I'm going to scrape it with the back of my trowel. Now maybe you're wondering why I'm doing that. Well, what's happening is I'm getting off all the little loose particles, okay? And the reason for that is when I start to apply that putty coat, it's very fine. And you don't want any trash in your finish coat because it's going to affect the finish if there's any little pieces of hanging debris, okay? So we always scrape our base coat down before we mist it and before we apply the putty coat. What I'm going to use is I'm going to use a garden sprayer to help me mist this wall back here. But if you don't have a garden sprayer, it's fine. Use a sponge or use a brush in a bucket. Just throw water on there, okay? But you don't want to put too much water on because then you're going to wind up getting blisters in your finish coat. You really just want to mist the wall, okay? So that's what I'm going to do now. Okay, we're going to do our putty coat now. If you notice, I'm wearing gloves, okay? Not only that, I want you to take a look at the top. It's wet. You want to mist the top of your board before you start to put your putty coat on and start mixing it, because if there's a little bit of dry plaster, you'll get that suction. And so mist your board before you put on your putty coat, because it'll help you mix it, okay? The reason why I wear gloves is because the putty coat is, for the most part, lime. And lime is very caustic, okay? I'm wearing long sleeves to protect my skin. I'm wearing gloves to protect my hands, because that lime, it'll suck all the moisture out of my hands as well, okay? So wear gloves if you're going to use a lime-based plaster. Now I'm pouring on my lime, my putty coat, onto my mortar board. All right? So there we go. Get a nice amount there. Now this is what I want to tell you about my putty coat. Lime needs something to help it set and get hard. And we're going to add that to it. Now just lime, it'll stay wet for a long time. It'll stay wet for months, okay? It'll eventually dry out, but it's a chemical reaction that helps the putty coat set up. So we're going to do that now. What's really important is that you create like a little plaster donut. That's what that is going to be, a little plaster donut there, okay? So there we go. I've hollowed out the middle. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take clean, cool water, and I'm going to pour that water right in the center of my little plaster donut there. All right? Okay, now it's time for me to add my gauging plaster. That's what this is here. And I'm going to add it to the center of my plaster donut. Now I have water in the center because it's easier to mix two wet things than it is to mix something that's wet and something that's dry. So let me get a little bit more gauging plaster, and I really want the water to absorb all of the gauging that I'm putting in, because it's going to make it easier for me to mix the two plasters together. Okay, let me get a little bit more. Give that a minute to soak up a little bit. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to mix it, and I want to mix it thoroughly, just the center, just the gauging, before I introduce the lime plaster. And the reason for that is once I start introducing the lime, it's going to start that chemical reaction, and the lime plaster is going to start to get a little thicker, and that's, remember, the gauging is what allows the lime to set up. So let me make certain that I mix it really good here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a second donut circle. It's an inner one, because what I want to do is I want to mix just a little bit of the lime putty with the gauging plaster. Just a little bit first. That's what I'm doing right here. All right, now comes time to get the putty coat on the hawk. That's what this is. Now I got to tell you, this lime, the putty coat, is time sensitive. So it'll harden very quickly, so I have to move very quickly. Here we go. I'm placing my hawk here. I've already got a little bit of plaster here so we know that it's going to stick. I'm going to scoop it up there, just like that. Clean off my edges. Keep my plasters centered. Now I'm ready to go. Now I want to draw something to your attention, and it's my safety glasses. And you'll want to wear safety glasses when you're working with lime. And the reason for that is you get a little bit of lime in your eye, you'll never forget it. It is very, very painful. So make certain if you work with lime to always wear safety glasses. So I've got my first coat of putty coat on, okay? Now if you notice, it's not perfect. I've got lines here. It's not perfectly smooth, but that's okay. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over it again with a very thin coat of plaster, and that's called doubling up, and that's what I'm going to do. It's going to knock down all these imperfections. So I can't do it right now because it's too green. Now what's green? That means it's still a little wet. See what I'm able to do here? That's too green to double up and to start laying it down. I need it to be just a little more firm to the touch, but not dry, and we're not there yet. So we're ready to start doubling up on our putty coat. It's firm to the touch, but it's still damp. But if you notice, there's no handprint there. So we're heading in the home stretch, almost done. I've doubled up on my finish coat. Now it's time to lay it down. I'm going to water trowel it. I'm going to use this tool here, and it's a felt mop or a felt brush or a plasters mop. It goes by a number of names. My partner, John, he used to call it a blister buster. So we're all finished water troweling our wall, and this is the finished product. I gotta tell you, I'm very satisfied with how smooth and perfect this job turned out. So I'm finished with the wall, and normally what I would say at this point is, and that's all there is to it, right? Well, I have to honestly tell you, there's one other thing, and that is practice. This is really one of those jobs, especially if you're going to plaster an entire wall or entire ceiling, that you want to practice first. And believe it or not, one of the best places that you can practice is inside your closet at home, because chances are you're the only one that's going to see the inside of your closet. So it's a great place to practice your plastering skills before you actually commit to a room, a wall or ceiling that everyone can see. Make certain that I place a link in the description below to all the materials that I used in this video, along with all of the tools. This is Leah saying, with a little practice, you can do this. See you next time.